So all we need to do is think of something funny to say to open the podcast up. This could be it. We could start with me saying this. I don't know.
Don't make me laugh.
I missed a ring-a-ding, da-da-da-da.
We've got different bits ready. This is fantastic. We're all very ring-a-ding centered, and that's perfectly fine. We're all Alan coming into this podcast with a bit of excitement.
Cool. That'll do.
Will it? All right, roll the intro. Hello and welcome back to Who's There, a Doctor Who podcast. My name is Troy, his name is Crispy, and we are the hotline that accepts your calls from anywhere in time and space. But, much like last year with the Season 1 reviews, for a lot of our episodes, we're not doing it alone, because there's a lot of Doctor Who to talk about, and so we've invited some of our best friends within the Whoniverse space, within the content creation space, we should say, to come on by and give us their thoughts. And today, we're starting off with a fantastic guest. You may remember he was on the podcast a very long time ago, 2.5 years ago, which makes me feel very old just saying it. But it is the wonderful man behind the retrospective videos on the numerous different eras of Doctor Who. I'm going to be hassling him later about where the next one is. I'm sure he's looking forward to that. But CleverDickFilms, Richard, welcome to the podcast once again, sir. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've come out of my long hibernation to make a rare appearance. No, I'm beavering away in the background. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. And we should also explain for the video listeners, Crispy currently doesn't have a camera. Crispy, where are you right now, good sir?
Hello, everyone. I am currently at the Gold Coast with my girlfriend and our friends, and we're having a lovely long Easter weekend. But this hotel we're in doesn't have Wi-Fi, or there's so many things wrong with this place, but we're having fun regardless. So yeah, the internet's not strong enough for me to have a webcam tonight, but that's all right. You just get the sultry tones of Crispy Pro.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're being out-sultried, I think, personally, but, you know, we can still have your sultry tones.
Tough competition.
Crispy's agreed to have some kind of picture for the edit. I don't know what picture of him we're choosing here, but I'm sure you're enjoying whatever it is. So you just get to stare at his face for the next hour or so, however long this episode goes on for. So, gentlemen, we are here to discuss the latest episode of Doctor Who, Season 2, Episode 2, Lux. And one thing we did this time with our guests is, where possible, we asked them to pick which episodes they'd like to talk about, so that way they're kind of more centred towards the ones that appeal to them most. And you were, I think, were the first one to reply, Richard. You picked your episode before I think anyone else did. So you got first picking, so you were straight in on Lux. So I think, if you don't mind being put in the hot seat, take us forward. What did you think of the episode Lux?
Well, I'm glad I chose this one. It was the one that I think that certainly captured my attention in the trailer above everything else. I was a little bit tempted at first maybe to wait for next week's one because, you know, I'm always a sucker for when they go, it's the scariest ever episode kind of thing. You know, you're probably going to get something good then. But no, I'm glad I went for this one because I thought, it's in the cinema. We've got the animation coming out. I thought there'd probably be a lot to talk about, and I've got a bit of a list of notes and things, and hopefully they'll come up organically as we speak. But I really enjoyed it. It was not faultless, but then Doctor Who never is, and nothing really ever is completely faultless. But I thought it was. A lot of people are saying the pacing was a lot better than some previous Russell T Davies efforts, and I think it was a little less stuffed. Overall, I think there were some parts where perhaps there were too many ideas sort of competing with each other, but overall, I think it benefited somewhat from the minimalism of having, essentially. I obviously had quite a few characters popping up at the end, but essentially you only had 5-6 main characters, and a sense of focus on the atmosphere, I think, was of benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Very, very well said. Well, we do typically have a way of introducing our thoughts overall as a group. How do you feel about scoring something out of 10? Is that something you tend to do?
Yeah, I'll give it a go.
Okay, all right. So yeah, it just kind of gives everyone, well, at least I found it's interesting, especially for me and Crispy, to kind of see, whether we're in agreement or not. And to be fair, Crispy did text me last night and said, I'm really excited to talk about this one. So I kind of have an idea that he might have a positive score for this, as most people do.
Well, I think the problem with ranking things is that inevitably you have to compare apples with oranges sometimes. You're sort of forced to do that, I think I'd probably, if I was to give it a score out of 10, I would do it across sort of this era, perhaps, rather than trying to compare it to like Remembrance of the Daleks or Inside the Spaceship or something, which is just such a completely different context that I don't think it's necessarily fair. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10, I would say, for Ncuti's era, I think.
Okay. Crispy, what are your thoughts? Where are you at with the score?
Well. CleverDickFilms and I are in complete agreement. I too give it an 8 out of 10.
Wow. Okay, making me feel like I was a bit too generous. I was sitting somewhere between a 9 and a 10, and I settled on a 9.5.
Whoa.
I kind of have the attitude I've had before of, like, if I can't find something wrong with it, why give it a lower score? And I personally, there's nothing that comes to mind right off the bat that, like, I would change particularly. Like, I don't know. The only question I had coming out of it at the end, well, two questions. One was why I can't remember his name. I've only seen the episode once. Irritatingly, I do plan to watch them twice every week. I've not had a chance this week. But the cinema, the guy who was working in the cinema, how his wife showed up with the matches. I don't quite understand why she suddenly appeared holding them. I don't know if I'm meant to understand that.
I noticed his name, actually, because it came Reginald Pye, and I was thinking, is there some significance to that name? I thought I'd heard it before, so I looked it up, and I don't know if it's just coincidental, but there is a World War II veteran who died like earlier this year from Wales who was called Reginald Pye, so I don't know if that was maybe just in the ether or whether there was any particular significance to choosing that name, but I thought the coincidence of him being from Carmarthenshire, I think, if it's pronounced that way, in Wales, I just thought it stood out as a kind of interesting name. But yeah, I agree. The couple of things, the reason why I would knock it down from a 10 for me was I think there were a couple of things that weren't quite as explored or elaborated on as perhaps they could be. Some of them are just my own personal kind of rather arrogant suggestions about how I would have done it. Like, for example, I think emotionally it would have been better if the wife character, we didn't see her holding the box of matches until she actually handed them to him, because as soon as you saw her, she had the matchbox in her hand. So you've kind of already got the emotional resolution of that brief scene before it really has arrived. She could have arrived and then, said what she had to say and then hand him the matches, and you saw him take it from her hand. I think that would have paid off a little bit better. But I think the things that the episode suffers from, I think, are more to do with the fact that, again, you've got 45 minutes to squeeze in quite a lot of story and character development, that the format of the episode doesn't really allow you to really develop and pay off as well. For example, the obviously the bit that I imagine most people would talk about is the sort of meta moment where they step into the fan living room, and I thought that was handled quite well. I could see some people go, "Oh, they're insulting us" and all that. I think it was a little bit more affectionate than that, and there was a playfulness to it. Obviously, there was a tongue in cheek. But there was a kind of inclusivity to it as well, of saying, each of these people are fans. It wasn't just the fawning, you can't do any wrong fan who was legitimate. There was also, I think it was Robin was the lady who was more critical. She was sort of the avatar for the kind of, not quite a sort of not my doctor crowd, but more sort of critical of everything. And she was still a part of that group. She was still legitimate as a fan. And however, I think that the emotional payoff of that, because it was such a brief scene within a larger story, I don't think I felt a little bit it was too obviously manipulative. I mean, all all drama is manipulative. They're not real, but they're, you know, our emotions are being tugged, and the sophistication of how you manipulate someone's emotions is by the person not realizing that they are being manipulated. And when Murray Gold's music came in from, I think it was from the scene in The Big Bang when Matt Smith is going back through his timeline and he puts
that's right.
Amy to bed, and then he goes, "I'll skip the rest, I hate reruns," and he steps through the crack and erases himself. That musical cue, which in that story, is linked to Amy, to Matt Smith, to the 11th Doctor in that season, kind of pays off quite well because you've got a quite long scene. But they just sort of plonked it in to this scene where when they became sort of self-aware that they were fictional characters and said, "You need to go on, you need to carry on and be," they sort of plunked this emotional song from another era and another kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because in my head that song is more in sort of indelibly linked with that scene in The Big Bang, but it just seemed a little bit over the top and didn't help that it distracted from the here and the now and sort of recalled an earlier era. Maybe that was part of the idea, because there are a few themes from earlier Murray Gold periods that came up in the episode, and I think last week as well. But in this one, perhaps it was some, again, like a meta commentary. You know, that the music was referring back to the legend of Doctor Who, to earlier moments of Doctor Who that they were obviously fans of. But I felt it distracted a little bit, and it undermined the emotion and the sacrifice of those characters, because it was just a bit over the top, I thought. But still, overall, I thought it was a great idea, and it was kind of an idea that you couldn't really avoid, I think, if he hadn't done that. You know, I really thought when they walked forward, I know I'm jumping to about 3/4 of the way through the episode here before I even talked about the beginning, but
You're fine.
When they approached the screen and pushed the glass out, I thought, for probably the first time ever, is that this would be perfect in 3D.
Yeah,
you know?
That went through my mind as well. I did think about that.
It would have been great to have it like in the cinema or something with a 3D glasses or something, because there's a lot of things that I just don't, 3D is a gimmick, but I think it would have worked really well for this story, and also would have made it interesting with Mr. Ringerding when he was 2D. He'd be like a cardboard cutout, but when he became 3-dimensional at the end, it would have given him that depth that the animation was going for as well. But I thought that would have been really, really interesting to do that. But there was that idea of the music undermining the emotion a little bit of that scene, and also I would have liked, because the episode's called Lux, which is a measurement of light, basically. It's about a cinema, which is about light, but also cinemas are about darkness. I was thinking, when you go to the cinema, the big difference to watching telly at home is, the lights go down low or they go out and you're in the darkness and you've got that beam of light coming through. And although there were obviously visual references to that, because you're in a cinema and light is being projected, I think thematically that could have been explored a little bit more, like the idea of him being, he can't go outside, it's the dark. I mean, they did, obviously, light was a big part of it. The roof exploded out and then he grew in the light. But I felt like, I don't know, there could have been more exploration of the contrast between light and dark, and maybe in some way thematically, because the one thing I was frightened isn't the right word, but I was slightly concerned about going into this episode was that Mr. Ringerding was going to turn out like the monster in Hyde, where at the end we realise actually he's a really lovely person and we feel sorry for him and he just wanted love or something. And they didn't quite do that. I mean, obviously, when he got what he wanted at the end, he just sort of dissipates into nothing, into everything. So he's, I wouldn't say we sympathise with him, but he certainly is de-threatened, he's defanged by this experience. But I think I would have, funnily enough, despite that, I think there could have been a little bit more to say that a lot of maybe they could have played up a little bit more of his anger and his hatred, maybe that he was contained within a light beam in the darkness of the theatre, and that when he broke out of that, he has no reason to be malevolent anymore. I don't think that could have been. I think that could. I don't know if I'm being clear in what I mean, but I think that could have been explored
I get
a
it,
little bit more. But there's two minor niggles, to be honest, because I think overall it was a really, really good episode.
Totally fair. This is why, I don't make a habit out of bigging up someone's ego right the way through an episode. This is why I got you on, because that insight, I honestly don't think you get that from anyone else, because you've got that lens with the videos you do. Like, that is, like, you just sat here and just, like, lapped that up. That's fine, honestly. Yeah, I fully agree.
We're getting this for free.
The interesting thing with the music, with the Matt Smith music, was I read somewhere, I think it was in a review someone mentioned somewhere, they were like, a track from Matt Smith's era is going to appear in the episode. And I was like, okay, interesting. But there was a little, like 3-second bit of Amy Pond music in the opening TARDIS scene when he makes whatever the device was called.
Yes.
And I went, oh, is that it? And so when it came on later in full, I think it's the Sad Man with the Box is the name of it. I don't know, but when that came on later, I was like, "Oh no, this is what they were talking about." But yeah, the meta scene. I imagine we're going to get some different takes on that. I think the thing I like about the meta scene is that they've ended it in such a case where the Doctor doesn't fully realise that he's in a show, because there's been hints like in The Devil's Chord where he's like, I thought the music was non-diegetic, or bits like that. But they kind of resolve it while they're in the scene as this isn't real. And then at the end of the episode, like, oh no, it actually is real. And you can interpret that how you want, but I kind of interpret it as, for the sake of the story, the Doctor thinks it's not real, and that's fine, but for us, we know it is. And, like, that kind of reality isn't fully broken between us, and I like that they did it to that level and not further.
Did you notice, though, in the end credits that the three characters had surnames? They said, we're the kind of characters that don't have last names.
Oh, I saw someone point that out, and I didn't register the... Yeah, of course.
I didn't... What? I didn't see that at all.
Yeah, they do have surnames in the end. Someone put it on Twitter about the credits having surnames, and I was like, why are they pointing that? What's the significance of that? Yeah, completely forgot. Yeah. That is... Oh.
Do we think they're coming back at all, those three? I've seen, like, people being like, oh, they'll be at the end of every episode this season. Do you think they'll come back at all?
Maybe finale with Miss Flood teasing the whole, show ends May 24th, but I kind of would just hope they were there for that episode and that's it. We know they're there now, that's it.
I don't think so. Although I think on the DVD it would be funny if they had like a little behind the sofa feature with them and something.
Oh, it's their voices being like, to select audio navigation, press enter now.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, usually I don't tend to read much online criticism and things, but
and you're better for it, believe me.
But I saw a couple. I don't know how widespread it is, but I saw a couple of people, saying that they were being insulted by Russell T Davies, etc., etc. And I don't see that at all. I think that it was quite an affectionate, sympathetic. It did poke fun, but in the way that Russell T Davies does, and Moffat and others, with I felt that. They were minor characters, these fans, but they were, and they were caricatures because they were minor characters, and it was essentially a gag. But I still felt that it was still an affectionate and kind of, as I say, inclusive kind of representation of the fans. And
Crispy, anything for you to add on for your scoring? Anything that builds on? Richard, are you both in agreement?
No, I'm in agreement. My one thing is that I feel like Russell had the idea of like, let's do this meta thing, and there is just so much you can do with the meta idea, and I feel like Russell really tried to do everything he could, but I don't know, the pacing of the episode was so perfect for me up until that point, but I can understand why Russell wanted to spend as much time as he did in the meta scene. But up until then, dare I say, like, it was the most perfect episode of this era up until then. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm alone in that thought, but that's my theory. That's my opinion.
I think if there was one thing I'd have changed, I would have had one of the three disagree with Blink being the best episode. Because, like, Blink being the best one is a common opinion, but especially people who are still watching the show now, they don't all agree on that. So it could have been Blink, definitely Blink, and the other one might have gone, I thought Heaven Sent was the best one. Like, just a little... Like, kind of, I thought that could have been quite good. But I can get why they were going for the joke of, like, Belinda not knowing what Blink is and going, oh, that sounds like an epic. Like, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I thought it was, I did see some fool hack journalist was saying about, the episode takes a swipe at Stephen Moffat and it's like, well, it doesn't, because the Doctor suggests another Stephen Moffat episode is better, so it wasn't. Was
Yeah, he does actually complain.
So it's what about Boom? But it was more about anything that isn't in the current era, because none of them suggested an episode that wasn't within the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, true. Because they obviously want to try and... Well, they could have referenced either, really, yeah, I was going to say. Because I think they had collection box sets on the shelf from the classic era.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, I talking about like Easter eggs and stuff. I found myself. I've only seen it the once as well, but I need to look at it again because I did find myself like a proper nerd, just trying to examine the stuff in the background and see what they actually had on their shelves. It was always out of focus, but you could tell like different eras. They didn't just have the Blu-rays either, the collection box sets. They also had, I'm sure, the Key to Time DVD. Collection was on the shelf there, because that came in sort of a pink cardboard box and things, and the posters as well. Like they had one of the man traps on the wall in one side, and I
wonder if they have a copy of Lung Barrow like you do.
I didn't see any New Adventures on there, no, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I mean that goes into a wider thing as well. Like, I thought the set design. And the kind of the general aesthetics of it, I thought were really, really good. I mean, obviously, costumes is really great, and they always look great in good costumes. The attention to detail and I watched the Unleashed for it, and I must say, I think Unleashed is a much better show. I know there's a lot of fans of Confidential, but I always used to get a bit frustrated when I watched Confidential because it seemed like there were about 15 minutes of program, and then. I don't know, was it longer in those? Was it half an hour, 45 minutes? It was quite a long program.
Original Confidential used to be as long as the episodes themselves, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but most of it seemed to be montages of Classic Who or other parts of the modern series with sort of the latest Sugar Babes hit or something overlaid, and that used to frustrate me somewhat. I think Unleashed is a lot better. You tell me I didn't
get the blood pumping. Come on, that's the exciting part.
Yeah, but I'm old, Troy. You've got to remember. I was old when New Who was young, so I really like Unleashed because I think it gives you a more actual insight into the program and its making. And this episode in particular, I thought was great. It showed a lot of I like his like work experience bit where he goes with the Foley department and things like that, which is always interesting because I think that's the stuff that really inspires young people to want to go and work in the industry and see how it's made like that. But they had a bit of a focus on the cinema interior was a whole set that was constructed for it.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was really impressive.
I thought they would have just rented something out. Wow,
exactly.
I would never.
Funnily enough,
have guessed that.
in the episode, they reveal that it was the major sort of shell of it was the recording studio from Abbey Road from last year. But they obviously put in the steps and the chairs and all that, and it just the design of it and the look of it, I think, was really, really evocative of that time period. And that kind of Americana is quite amazing. They shot all the location stuff outside, like basically on the seafront or on the the bit in Cardiff during the storms, which you can't tell at all, I don't think, in the episode.
No, I don't think so either. I think that episode of Unleashed was one of the best ones. Yeah, like it's funny because we're very much alike in what we want to bring up. I want to bring up the Foley artist bit because the work experience thing is interesting, but some roles, like obviously it's perspective, but I've found some of them more interesting than others in some of the. But I think that's mainly because we already know some bits from like the stuff that we do. But the Foley artist thing, I was so fascinated by that. I don't know, Crispy, if you know what a Foley artist is.
Of course I do. Is that sound? That's like sound effects.
Yeah, just to check. Well, yeah, for people who haven't watched the episode, like people who do like the sound effects that go over the episode, so there's someone there eating popcorn to make the sound that is in the episode. It's not just
any sound effect that
there.
isn't like a special sound effect. It's I think a lot of people don't realise how much. I've done a lot of Foley myself, and it's one of those kind of unsung heroes, really. Like any time anyone even moves, there's a Foley artist. Most sound that you hear in an episode or anything really film has been dubbed over later because it just doesn't get captured in the same way. So, you know, when you hear like someone's clothing, or when you, obviously the sonic screwdriver, you've got two different departments. You know, you'll have the department that does the sound of the sonic screwdriver, but then you'll have a whole group of people that are just doing the handling noise. Most notably with Matt Smith's one, because it was a lot of click bits whenever he handled it. It's always great. It's great fun to see, because it just looks like such a great fun thing to do. But it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know anything about at all. But it's good fun to do as well, because I as some people might know, I'm a teacher. We had an enrichment day a couple of years ago, and I didn't know what to do, because it's quite difficult because we don't have edit suites and cameras and things like that, but I wanted to try and use some of my filmmaking background as part of it. So I got them all I just got a load of stuff from the catering department, like metal bowls and bubble wrap and bits of card and little those little stones that you use to blind bake little what do you call it, tarts and stuff. And I showed him a silent clip of an episode of Pingu, and I said to the groups of kids, I said, right, in your groups, you've got to come up with the sound design, you've got to do the Foley for this, and it was good fun. It gave you a headache, but it was good fun, you know, when you got 30 kids all making noisy sounds.
Oh, it's lovely.
So much fun.
But I think a lot of people got no idea. I was slightly taken aback, because I've forgotten his name now, the host, Powell.
Stefan Powell, yeah.
Stefan Powell, yeah, and he's got the best Welsh accent. But he was like, it was invented. Foley was invented by some bloke in Hollywood or something like that, or words to that effect. And I was like, how very dare you? You're talking about Jack Foley. Show him the respect he deserves.
Oh, no, it is really good. Actually, we should mention, I don't know if we mentioned it last week, Crispy, but Unleashed is available now worldwide on YouTube. You can't watch it on YouTube in the UK because it's on iPlayer, but if you're in any other country, like anywhere where Doctor Who's on Disney Plus, Unleashed is on YouTube, so make sure you check it out, because it is well worth watching. Especially this one, that episode this week has been one of, if not the best Unleashed one, I think, of the new run, because I just, the selection of stuff they showed and talked about, like, it's not like I'm not interested before, but I was particularly like, wow, some of the stuff they did there I thought was a real standout. It's a good one to watch. Like they said about how the out exterior of the pier with the cinema, like they had to put like the new sets on. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah. No, I was going to say that the thing that I really wanted to watch it for, and before I came on here, was to just double check about how they did the animation for Mr. Ring-a-Ding, because I suspected, you know, that it was. I know they've got a bit more money, they've got a bit more production value these days, but I didn't necessarily expect them to have actually done the hand animation, you know, similar to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was still an amazing achievement, especially then when no one had really done that on that kind of scale before. But they essentially did the same thing with this, you know, with their hand animating. And I was interested to, I mean, I don't know much about traditional 2D animation, because it's not something that I can do at all, but I did remember that so back in the day, at the time when those cartoons that this episode was sort of riffing off were made, they used to animate them at like 14 or 15 frames a second. And then, no, sorry, it was normally 12 frames, because then they could double up the frames to make 24, but they actually did 24, 25 frames individually for every shot in this episode, and it must have taken them absolutely months. The reason why I wanted to look that up was because I thought, is there some significance to the number of people who went missing? As I said, there's 15 people. Yeah. And I thought, is that how many frames there were in a shot of animation, perhaps? But no, there was no coincidence to that, no significance to that, whatever.
I just thought 15 for 15th Doctor.
Oh, of course, yeah. See, I didn't make that connection.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
We inform each other. That's how it works. It's great.
But I thought, why not make it like 25 people, and then you've got 25 frames. But that's the other thing. I don't know if I missed something, but when they blew up the celluloid at the end, how did the people get out? How did they survive?
Well, I think because when the frame burned, when the
Oh,
Doctor
that's
and Belinda
right,
were in it,
yeah.
they were like, the flame burned, either we die or we get out. So I'm guessing they just,
Yeah.
because it worked for them, they figured it would work for everyone else.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
I could have explained that, but yeah, true.
My other issue was, well, let's say issue, but it was more just the resolution of the villain. Like he said, they didn't really explain that he wasn't malevolent anymore. And it was kind of like he's expanding, and then the problem's dealt with himself. Like, can it come back later? Like, how's that work? What happens if he managed to regain control of it?
He is infinite. He is a god now.
Yeah.
And therefore, someone said something, I think it was Philip Purser Hallard, who does the Black Archive, sort of editor of the Black Archive books. He did an interesting sort of overview, initial response to it, where he said about this idea that for Russell T Davies, the pantheon, the gods, the baddies across this thing are, they're a polytheistic thing. There's lots of gods, and individually, therefore, they're quite scary and they're quite controlling. But by Lux sort of expanding and becoming omnipresent in a way, makes him kind of a monotheistic god and therefore kind of irrelevant. It doesn't really matter anymore, which kind of links a little bit. I mean, Russell T Davies has professed a lot in the past of being an atheist, which is ironic considering the amount of kind of imagery and narrative arcs that he's borrowed, especially in Doctor Who, from Christianity. I mean, certainly in the Tennant era, you've got the Doctor returning essentially as Jesus. But I thought that was I don't know how I feel about that at the minute, but I thought that was an interesting sort of take on it, this idea of him becoming so powerful in a way that he becomes irrelevant because he's gone above and beyond anything. He's above the pettiness of small life. But I do think, like I said before, I think that there could have been a little bit more development in because he's supposed to be the god of light in a way. And we've had, the trickster, we've had characters who are malevolent beings who are just crazy. Arguably the Toymaker's a bit like that as well. But with Lux, there could have been more of a specific motivation that related to what he was. If he's the god of light, they could have developed that more, this desire. That's why I think it would have been better to perhaps explore, he says arrogantly, I thought it would be better, Russell T Davies, this award-winning writer. But I just feel that the desire for freedom from, because essentially, a film, a photograph is captured light. It is contained within a frame, much like the Doctor and Belinda were when they were in it. And perhaps Lux could have felt like that. He was trapped and he wanted to escape. They could have built on that he needs to go outside element. He can't go outside a little bit more, so that when he does escape, he kind of gets what he wants, and in the process, the malevolence, the anger that he has towards others drops away because it's no longer necessary. And maybe that's all implied, but it could have been made a bit clearer, I think.
Well, my big question with the villain walking out of it is which one was the Harbinger and which one was the God? Because the gods have Harbingers, but the only thing Harbinger-wise we had was the letters on the front of the cinema. So is Mr. Ring-a-Ding the Harbinger for Lux, who is basically possessing Mr. Ring-a-Ding, and then the whole thing becomes a god by becoming so big, as you say, that it's irrelevant? That was the thing that I was a little bit confused by. As it knocked the score down for me, maybe if I rewatched it might, but that was one question I had coming out. It was which one was the Harbinger? Which one wasn't?
Yeah, that's true, because in a way, the little boy in the previous, that was sort of Maestro's Harbinger, who then was still around after she was defeated, wasn't it? He sort of poked his head out of the door, and I thought, this character's going to come back. I think that's interesting. That I think you're right. There is a bit of a discrepancy there. Of is it just that the idea that you could drop those letters from the film with Rock Hudson and create Harbinger? Did that come first, and then
maybe
they didn't really think it through, perhaps?
But that means we're 2 for 2, 2 for 4 basically on gods having Harbingers, because the Toymaker didn't technically have a Harbinger, he was just kind of there. But then Maestro did have a Harbinger, and so did Sutak. But now Lux didn't, maybe, unless you consider did, I don't know.
Unless you consider the little doll the Harbinger or something.
Maybe, because I was wondering about that, whether, because you could count maybe Stooky Bill as the Harbinger possibly, and the giggle coming out of it or something, and So yeah, my takeaway, I don't know if I was wrong, and it was that Mr. Ringading was the Harbinger being possessed by Lux, so that it was more of a symbiotic relationship than any of the other ones. That was how I kind of took it.
I think that's probably about as close to an explanation as we can get, I think.
That's what us fans do. We try and fill in the gaps where we're not
Let
too
us
sure.
know in the comments.
Exactly. Speaking of comments, we probably should get into calls. Actually, no. One more point I do want to make. This is going to be this is quite the discussion. I love having people on to get extra thoughts. It's brill. What's everyone's consensus? I'll open, I guess, with the commitment to 15 and Belinda's story and they get her home arc, because I really have to say, going into the episode, my big thing, and maybe it was informed because it was a popular criticism or hope, I should say, was that they were going to drop the story. It was going to very much be like, oh, once we go on our first adventure, that's it. But I think the first episode, the opening of the episode, the first 5 or 6 minutes really sets it up well. And I interestingly saw an argument on Twitter that someone said that Belinda bringing up her family and saying, you know, I want to go and see them, is kind of like a mirror to like a kidnapping situation of like bringing up loved ones so that the kidnapper will be like, all right, I'll let you go.
Oh my gosh.
I saw something like the comparison. I'm like, actually, I kind of see that. It's dark, but maybe there was something there. I don't know. But point being, there was like tension between them, and she still is like, I want to go home. I'm not just dropping this. And like in seeing what the Doctor does and how he helps people, she still wants to get home, but he has said, you know, we need to go to a few more places. And I'm at a point where I'm like, narratively, I'm okay if they don't bring it up as much for the next few episodes because they need to go to places anyway, and she's settled into
I don't think
the
they
good
will.
that he does.
I think we saw in the episode, certainly when she said, I do trust you, I do, when he gets lifted up, that there was, in a sense, a culmination of her willingness to go along with him and to go on those adventures. She seemed more excited to do so. And a trust that he's not necessarily manipulating her. She can see him trying to get her home. So, yeah, I think you're right. There should be a certain laying to rest of that a little bit, at least.
Like, I'm okay with that now if they pause it for a bit, yeah. Because I think they built it up well and natural, and it's not just been dumped. Crispy, your thoughts?
Oh, well, I was just like really impressed that within the first 5 minutes they talk about it. And then they're like, oh, we'll poke our head out. Oh, yeah, it's 1952. Oh, there's people missing. And then there is another conversation. She's like, all right, well, that's cool. Get me home. Get me home. That's all I want to do. And then the Doctor eventually is able to convince her. And yeah, as we say at the end, Belinda does trust the Doctor. So I think it probably won't be brought up at all next week, if anything. But yeah, I just think it was handled really, really well. And Belinda feels like a real, tangible character.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's quite a strong character. I like the moments of her confidence, and there's a vulnerability that is believable, but at the same time, it's not a kind of a powerless vulnerability, if there's such a thing. There's a sense that she is overwhelmed slightly by what she's seeing, but then she kind of gathers herself and takes control without necessarily the need for the Doctor to kind of snap her out of it. She's a far stronger character than perhaps I was expecting. There is a sense that, and you know, maybe it's just patterns that happen automatically in writers' work, but you know, you've got Belinda almost being like a Martha character, but without the unrequited love element. You had Ruby as a kind of Rose, new version of Rose, and now you've got Belinda as a sort of new version of Martha. Not only in the sense that she's a medical professional, but in the way that Rose was kind of like a girl from a working class background who came from an estate in some way, and then you had this contrast with someone who had a slightly maybe more privileged background, who was more academic. You've got those parallels, I think, a little bit, and it is almost like Russell T Davies is not retreading the same ground necessarily, but returning and kind of refining some of those ideas that he had originally. Because I know people love Martha, but I never felt that Martha was as strong as she could have been, or as played as well as she could have been. So I really like this. I really like how Belinda is similar yet different to her.
Yeah, where they've hit the ground running with Belinda, and especially because they've got less episodes, they need to make the characters like matter more across those episodes. Because if you have 1 or 2 episodes in a 13-episode run where the characters maybe aren't doing as much, you can forgive it a bit more because it's a smaller percentage. But when you've got only 8, if there's an episode or two where the character is not there as much or is not doing as much, you notice. And it's a big argument we made about season 1 was that like Ncuti was barely in one episode and then in the background of another for most of it. So that's like almost a quarter of the season where he's not really at the forefront. Whereas if that happened in a Tennant run, 2 episodes is not great, but in the grand scheme of things, you've still got 11 with him. That's fine. So yeah, I
think the problem
agree.
last year was that we went into the Devil's Cord with the infamous how many months has she been in the TARDIS? How many weeks has she been in the TARDIS?
Yeah.
That kind of jump forward, and it kind of undermined the development somewhat of her character. There wasn't that. I think what he's done with Belinda is better, similar in a way to how Rose was, a reluctant traveller in The End of the World. She ran into the TARDIS at the end of Rose, but when they arrived on the station, the elements of the Ninth Doctor just sort of being unaware of what the effect of that would have on her. I always remember the thing where she realises that languages can be translated because of a gimmick of the TARDIS, and her being, so you didn't ask, it's just in my brain, just changing my mind, you didn't even ask. It was similar to the kind of consensual argument at the end of the last episode, where the Doctor can sometimes just be blithely unaware of the effect and the kind of just assumptions that the Doctor can make sometimes about people. So I think that, although I think you're right, I hope that, we get some more, in the sense of their relationship, we get some more enthusiasm on the part of Belinda to travel and to fight wrong going forward. I do think it was important to establish that for her character, to just be a little bit more three-dimensional, so that we didn't have that skip forward button to get to running around and not caring where they are kind of thing.
Yeah.
But maybe that's because Belinda has a career, she has a role that we've seen, whereas Ruby very much didn't seem to have that, and felt very lost in the same way that I suppose Rose and Martha did as well.
No, it's an interesting argument because, of course, like you've got like the date forward planning you can see is stellar here, because they filmed a lot of this series as, the Church Ruby Road was coming out, that kind of thing. Like, it's years ago, and they knew the exact dates it was going to air, so they had the timing prepared there. So I think it does make the Ruby thing a bit weird, and it always has. I do like that. You can always make the joke out of it. Whenever there's a time jump in Doctor Who, you can always make the joke of Big Finish are sat there rubbing their hands together like, oh, we've got our way in, boys. And I saw that even with Robot Revolution. They're like, Big Finish, when they find out the 15 had 6 months on the planet, Miss Belinda Chandra. Yeah. It's like, yep, he's having it. Like, they could do whatever they wanted there. Maybe they could introduce Sasha as a companion for a bit. Who knows? Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we get into some calls and see what people think about the episode. And see what arguments they get to make, whether they agree or disagree with us. Shall we have a little look and see what we've got?
Yes, please. Let's do it.
Crispy, you pick the first caller. Any names you want to pick out here? Anyone stand out?
Are there any new names that we haven't seen before?
Oh, good question.
Because I'd be very... Peter,
yeah, there's a few here that seem quite new. Let's go for a few of the new ones, yeah.
That seems new.
Yeah, let's hear what Peter has to think about the episode.
Just finished Lux. That was absolutely insane. I loved every bit of that episode. I'd say I think it's Ncuti best performance. Belinda's just getting better and better, and Alan Cumming might be my favorite of the new sort of villains they've done so far. Yeah, that was insane. Love the podcast. Keep it up.
Thank you, Peter. Best Ncuti performance.
You,
what do we
Peter.
think about that?
I think he's certainly been pretty solid throughout, hasn't he? I mean, he's a great performer. He knows how to use his physicality. I would say that his performance in this is just as good as his other episodes. I wouldn't necessarily say that it stands out particularly, not in the same way that, say, there aren't moments, I think, of the same kind of level that really, those moments like Capaldi and doing the speech at the end of The Doctor Falls or something like that. There wasn't a moment like that, but I suppose, that's not the only measure of whether someone is a great actor or not. I think, his performance is great because he's the star, but he doesn't always go into a scene and dominate it. You can see that he's obviously quite a generous actor. He works with other actors. He gives them time to shine as well. And I think the fact that you've you've got a companion as well who really can stand out and shine amongst that. I mean, it's partly the writing, it's partly the performance, but there's different ways of delivering lines, and you don't always have to dominate over the whole thing. I think that on the topic of Ncuti and the casting of Ncuti and the not concerns, but the interest, I suppose you could call it, of how they would handle historical journeys. I think it would be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that they did acknowledge the time and the place, the era, the social context, not only for him but for his companion as well.
Yeah.
Which I thought was something that I suppose is a good thing. It hadn't even occurred to me that, of course, you've got an all-black, essentially TARDIS team, in how the people at that era would see it. I think that in the past, Russell T Davies has perhaps, and when I say in the past, I mean in RTD1 era, has perhaps skirted around the issue sometimes of racism without really handling it head on, by addressing perhaps the fact that there's a lot of myth in the modern day about, because white voices and white faces were prominent and recorded, those black voices, those black faces from history are sometimes forgotten about by people that want to push a particular agenda. You'll see a reference to an earlier period of time, or a program comes out set in an earlier period of time, and there'll be a black person in it, and they'll say, well, they weren't there. And it's like, well, they were. You just don't think they were because the history books didn't always, or the history books you read didn't record those
Exactly
things.
right.
Well said.
And they have acknowledged that in the past. They did that a bit in the Shakespeare Code. They did that a bit in the Thin Ice.
History's a whitewash. That was the line I was thinking of.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think Russell T Davies sometimes was in the interest perhaps of making it a little bit less, because a story about monsters and aliens doesn't always leave room to handle those kinds of subjects sensitively. So sometimes I think he's shied away a little bit from confronting that. And I think that some people might argue that they shied away from it in this story a little bit by writing in a way where they didn't have to confront those issues. They land at 4 a.m. So there's not that many people around. The only bit where they really sort of play on it is in the kind of what turns out to be a kind of fantasy reality, the film reality, where the policeman comes in.
Yeah.
But I felt that, and I'm not exactly the person to speak about it. I'm a white, middle-class English man, but I felt it was handled well in a story that wasn't necessarily about that issue centrally, but it was still acknowledged it, which I think was important and relevant, because if it wasn't addressed at all, and it wasn't just addressed once, it was addressed a couple of times, which I felt was good. It wasn't like just saying, right, we've acknowledged that and now we can ignore it for the rest of the episode.
Wipe your hands of it, it's done, yeah.
So I think that was good. And I think the 15th Doctor's sort of acknowledgement of it was interesting as well. Instead of saying, this is a horrific time in history, it was just sort of like, this is the way it is. Not accepting it, not agreeing with it, but sort of saying, I like that line where he says, she's like, that's horrific, like, why don't you do something about it, kind of thing. And he's like, sometimes I can't remember the exact line, but it's like, sometimes I topple evil, or I deal with evil, and sometimes I watch as worlds topple their own evils, and I shine. And I thought that was interesting, because it kind of said, this is a problem. On some level, I think it addressed the audience by saying, not all problems can be solved by a madman in a box, that sometimes we need to work together to deal with these things.
Yeah, there are some little exchanges like that I really love, and it's similar to the Space Babies one of the no one grows up wrong. Sometimes it's only like a little line or two of dialogue, but there's some that just really stick out to me as like, oh, that's a really nice, not just a line, but also a really nice delivery of it. And that's definitely one of those that I really picked up and went, oh, I like that one a lot. I like that a lot. Right, let's get through a couple more callers and see what else people have to say, because we've also got bingo to do. We've got bingo to check off, although, much like last week, I don't think we'll have too much to say. Thank you to everyone who's called in, by the way. We've had like another 25 callers, and we're not going to get through nearly any of them, but please do keep up. We're going to go through as many names as we can across the episodes. We really do appreciate it. Richard, does any name here stand out to you at all? Anyone that you want to pick out?
Is it Xiaomi? I keep saying that one.
Okay, Xiaomi, what have you got to say?
Xiaomi.
Suitably exotic.
Hey guys, this is Xiaomi here, calling from Mexico. OG fan from the podcast, but never called before. Mr. Ricketing, I'm still torn if I like it or not, because the ending is a little bit like convenient plot, and I'm not sure if I like it. Is one of those like it just workouts because it has to work out. I don't know, maybe 6 out of 10.
Okay, that's probably the lowest score I've seen for the episode.
6 out of 10.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it definitely does feel like a convenient ending. I agree on that front.
It wraps up very quickly, but I think it works. Mr. Ringading as a villain is probably one of the more interesting villains I've in recent memory
Agreed.
for Doctor Who. I really enjoyed Mr. Ringading.
And I saw an argument from someone saying that it was maybe like the 3D-ification of him was almost like a jab at the kind of like live-action remake or like kind of those kind of remakes of old films, and how the remake version often doesn't look anywhere near as good as the classic cartoony version.
No, I think it suited it because it was quite grotesque.
I think it was very Wallace and Gromit the Teeth. I couldn't unsee that looking at it. I just kept thinking of like, cheese, like just that grin.
Man.
I don't know why, but
I think they got the look just right. In that Unleashed,
Yeah.
there's a series of concept art that they did, and they all looked interesting in and of themselves. But it really feels like they got it just right for that. I think it's sort of Fleischer cartoon sort of look. And I think when it did become CGI, it was interesting because it was so much more grotesque. I mean, they didn't do anything to the design apart from make his eyes a bit more red around the edges, as far as I could tell. Maybe make his gums a bit redder, but it was much more grotesque as a 3D object than as a 2D one. But it was interesting again that he then reverted to the 2 dimensions as he ascended. Almost sort of taking away that grotesquerie that he'd had. Yeah, I can agree to some extent that there was a you know the ending was convenient, but at the same time, I think it's almost for me anyway. I kind of expect that to some extent. From Russell T Davies, he does tend to do that more often than not. I think I don't feel, and Doctor Who generally, I think in the modern era tends to have quite convenient endings in that way. I think it's partly a victim of the structure of the episode and the timing that they've got there. You know, because you've got to spend the first half essentially setting up a whole new location, new characters, new situation, a new atmosphere. And then you've only got a very limited amount of time to pay that off. And I think there's very few writers who can do that in a way where it does truly feel satisfying. But I think that the danger if you did try to sort of wrap it up nicer is that you'd have to lose some of the elements that make the show unique.
Yeah, I think for all like the criticisms you can make for episodes, I think Russell's one of the better ones for like being able to do a story that wraps up nicely in 45 minutes. I don't often have criticisms of how he ends episodes. Like I think, like again with the space he's got, the time he's got, I think he does a pretty good job. I would say.
I think it worked well in this one, particularly. I think that it was laid. The ending was laid down. It was heading in a certain direction. I think I mean, he even commented on it. The fan said, "Well, it's obvious, isn't it? You said that it's gonna burn, so you knew where it was headed."
Yeah,
but I think it would have worked. As I say, repeating myself, really is. I think if the motivation of Mr. Ringading was a little bit more explicit, then that would have paid off a little bit more satisfactorily at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, yeah. And also, for the caller specifically, nice to have one from Mexico. I don't know if you've had one from Mexico before, have we, Crispy? We need to do that map I've said. We just tick off countries where people have called in.
Well, yeah, we need a map of all our viewers. That'd be lovely. Thanks for calling in from Mexico.
It'd be so cool. Just tick them off. Yeah, honestly, I do think we need to do that. It'd be quite a fun little segment to have, and I really do think we need to start doing that. It's just lovely to have you all calling in from different places. And I think if we're all going to pick a caller each, I think I'm going to go for Coraline, which means you've got another one from another country, because I believe we've got a French one. We've got France, we've got Mexico.
Beautiful. Let's go.
We're mixing it up. I love it. We're a multicultural podcast, and I think that's what makes us the best. That's why you should subscribe, everyone. There you go. That's our poll for today. That's our poll.
Nice.
Coraline, what did you think of the episode?
Hi Troy, hi Crispy. Gordon here. So I should have called last week because the first episode was an 8 for me actually, but this one I hated it for so many reasons.
What?
Just to list a few. First, another episode about God. Why? Second, Belinda doing a complete 180 regarding what she thinks of the Doctor without anything massive happening. And third, the Doctor Who fans who thinks they don't matter and who gives, honestly, doormat energy. I mean, smart doormats, but still, I actually feel insulted.
Wow, this is a lot.
Wow,
Sorry, what was Caroline's first argument? She said another story about, but I didn't
Gods.
catch that first one. Oh, gods.
The gods,
okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that is.
Why me? Did you know about this?
No,
Troy?
I didn't. I just was like, oh, Coraline. Let's pick a. It's a nice name. I always think of the
this
film.
is good. It gives us a balanced perspective.
It does.
I suppose.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it, Coraline.
I think the central part there was, again, it was on how one reacts to the meta aspect and the representation of the fans. You know, I think, as I say, I think it's, you know, they are somewhat caricatured, as I say, because of the nature of what they are in the episode as these sort of simulacrums of fandom and in a small scene. But I think it's really thinking about what the intention was behind there, and I felt that it was more of a fun jibe in the same way that like Love and Monsters had representations of fandom and elements of fandom there. You know, there was a touch of that when they like, you know, we are friends, we found each other because of you. You know, that was the same sort of aspect of Linda, that they came together and then they formed their band and it became about the community.
The journey really was the friends he made along the way.
Exactly.
The one time that meme actually works. It actually works.
But I think that perhaps the affectionate aspect of it is undermined, as I say, by the very quick emotional peak and the music, which I don't really feel. Music is supposed to obviously guide your emotions, but also reflect the emotions, and I think that it was a bit too. You know, coming at the end of a season, which was what it was originally composed for, where you've had a character and a relationship built up over 12, 13 episodes, and you've got the hero character, this Doctor who's firmly established, sacrificing himself. That song worked, but being lumped into this episode, even as a kind of meta commentary of, you know, recalling music from an earlier time because of the fandom aspect, I just think it undermined how the audience was supposed to. It became a bit over the top, and therefore the actual, I think, intent of the scene was undermined for a lot of people.
Yeah, very well put. Very well put. Completely agree.
We got one more feature to do, and then we're going to do a bit of plugging for you, and then I'm going to ask the question. I keep teasing you because I'm desperate for an answer. You know it's coming. Sorry, but ladies and gentlemen, we are going to make a very brief return to a regular feature. And Richard, you said you watched our episode last week, so you know the theme that's coming. So why don't we roll right into
Bingo!
Oh yeah.
It's so funny having someone else here to hear the jingles Crispy did, but like in person. Ladies and gentlemen, and I've discovered as well on the edit, it does not fade out on the edit, Crispy, when I turn the volume down, so I'm just going to pause it abruptly. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to very briefly revisit the bingo card that we have for our season 2 episodes. Again, briefly, and I think what we'll probably do is once again just put it on the screen for a moment and then just talk it over. Once we have more to talk about, I'll put it on the screen for longer. But again, we're very, I think, finale loaded or later episode loaded with these. But here is the bingo card on screen now for you all to see. I think all of you are able to see it right now. If not, I'm going to do this for you, Crispy, just make sure you can see it as well. Richard, I don't know if you've got it in front of you, but that's what we have here.
Yep, absolutely can see it.
I think we only have one grid here we can possibly tick off, one bit we haven't quite talked about, and that's the regeneration, real or fake out. Do we think what happened with the healing of the hand, the leftover bi-generation energy, as well as pulling out the energy, very much akin to Capaldi in The Witch is Familiar, do we think that counts as regeneration? Are we ticking that off, or are we tentative?
No.
Okay. There you go. So thank you everyone for watching. That's all the discussion that we get.
I didn't think Shooty was going to regenerate.
When he first healed his hand, I thought, this seems like a bit of a... And when he said bi-generation, I've got some extra, I'm like, how the hell does she know what he's talking about? It seemed very much like he was addressing the audience there. And then when he was thrown up into the beams of light and the energy was coming out of him, I saw why that was dropped in. But I felt that it came so quickly before that, it was almost like an afterthought, and it was sort of, just plonk that back in so the general audience know what it is. Perhaps that could have been established much earlier on, I don't know. But it does seem a little bit convenient. He could just heal himself that easily. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of meant to be an extension of the whole I'm still in the first 15 hours of my regeneration cycle, except he's not in the first 15 hours of his regeneration cycle. He's far from it. So I don't know. So are we agreeing we're not ticking that off then? I mean, that's a bit but not enough on the regeneration. Okay. In that case, folks, the bingo card is not having anything ticked off, I don't think. We could make an argument the top one, the Doctor and Belinda don't become best friends. I think that one is probably not going to get checked off the way we're going, but I don't think they're best mates yet. So we'll keep that one open-ended, I think, for a little bit longer and see where we go. But I don't think there's anything else there we can tick off. So I think that's a no tick off for the bingo card. That'll wrap us up.
That's fine. We'll get some weeks like this.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, hopefully we can still get bingo. Just looking at it and trying to figure out what the best option is going to be. And I think 14th Doctor Returns is really going to stiff us in a couple of directions where things are ticked off. I really do. But we'll find out. So, we wrap up with a little bit of promo for you, Mr. CleverDickFilms. Can you please let the people know what is going on with your content? And, as I said, you're most known for your retrospectives. And as a big Capaldi fan and someone who really does love the videos you put out, I also would like at some point, if you have a teaser, if you don't, it's fine. But when the Capaldi Air episode will come out, the floor is yours.
Well, I know it's hotly anticipated. It has been for a very long time. Yeah, I've been working very hard on it for far too long, to be honest. It's I don't like to make promises and release dates and things like that because I always seem to miss them. I hoped it would be done by now, as many people would. The truth is that I actually kind of stumbled across a lot of extra research materials, which is quite difficult for the modern era. You know, that's the thing that really makes it tough because there's far less behind the scenes information and things that aren't already as part of puff pieces or marketing, essentially. So it makes it far harder to really get to the nitty-gritty of things. But anyway, I came across this material and I thought this is going to be really useful, and it ended up in a way kind of fundamentally altering the sort of primary thesis, really, of the whole thing. So I had to go back, basically, and rewrite the whole thing and expand it, and I hope it'll be a lot better as a result. But it has added a little bit to the time. So I know people are going to be disappointed, but I hope that when it's finished, which should be in the near future, it will be worth the wait. It's on its way. I have enjoyed doing it. I do feel it's interesting because I do really feel like I'm smashing into that crystal wall, just like the Doctor, to get to the end of it. So it's quite apt in that. Take
sense. As long as you need.
Oh no, don't say that.
And for all the episodes to make that comparison to, that makes sense. So, for people who don't know who you are, can you explain a little bit just what the videos are and where that people can find them?
Yeah, sure. So I created my YouTube channel back in the depths of history now, and I make videos very, very slowly, but I make them about retrospectives on essentially by the era of the main actor who plays the different Doctors. There's an element of autobiographical sort of personal experience, but also I try to look at the eras from a social historical context, talking about the TV production and the wider issues behind it and what informed certain stories and ideas. So it's kind of an attempt at a kind of comprehensive but not exhaustive kind of overview of the main sort of aspects. So if there's elements of classic Who that you're interested in that you don't necessarily have access to, then hopefully you'll find them interesting. I have actually had some people, I'm very flattered to say, who said they don't really like Doctor Who, but they watch my videos because they like seeing the history behind it, which I find very bizarre.
That's an interesting
that must
angle.
be a very niche audience, but
That is so strange.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I suppose in some ways it doesn't surprise me. Some people do like just putting video essays on topics they know nothing about, and then just taking that perspective. It's just interesting to think. Yeah. But the YouTube channel is
CleverDickFilms, which I chose in a moment of desperation, as I think sometimes we always do with our names online.
Absolutely.
I wanted something kind of catchy. I wanted something. I also, having spent a lot of my life being needlessly pedantic and anal and annoying to people, I thought I would preclude the criticism I might have as a smart ass by recognizing myself as a full of myself smart ass by calling myself a clever dick. What I didn't realize was that phrase doesn't always work internationally, nor does it seem to work generationally, because young people think there's something very strange. My name is Richard, and Dick is short for Richard, so I don't actually like being called Dick, but that's
I
just
think
the
probably
way it
out of
goes.
our three names, yours is probably the best one, I'll be honest. No offense, Crispy.
Gotcha. No, absolutely, it's awesome.
Well, yeah, it's become a thing, but it can't be changed now. So I've done videos on each Doctor up to soon coming the Capaldi era. I also do videos focusing on the companions, which my Patreons vote on a big list. The next one up, after I've finally completed Capaldi, will be a video on Ian and Barbara together, because I thought, well, they need to be a pair. So we're going to go all the way back to 1963 for that one. I also do audiobooks. You might be interested. At some point, I'm going to put all this together and put it on YouTube, unless I get sued. But on my Patreon, once a week, I do a chapter from an audiobook. I've done 8 Target novels so far, and I thought after I'd finished the last Target novel, I thought maybe I should do something that people would be interested in that they wouldn't easily have access to. So I thought, considering I have all the new adventures, I put a big vote up for which new adventure people would like me to read dramatically, and guess what? They all voted for
Longbarrow, baby.
Indeed. So
Absolutely.
we're up to chapter 12 or something of Longbarrow so far.
Wow.
And I think I might put all that together and when I finished it and put it out on YouTube for people if they're interested.
That sounds good. Yeah, definitely.
Just something for if people do indeed like my annoying voice, they might like to hear me do a very bad impression of Sylvester McCoy.
Well, I need to hear that. I do need to hear that. But no, not an annoying voice at all. That's why we had you here. And I really appreciate you coming in to offer your commentary. So thank you very much, Richard, for coming on once again.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
An utter joy. Crispy, you know what I'm going to say. Wrap us up with your closing comments. What have you got to say to wrap up our thoughts on Lux?
Oh, yeah. Well, Lux was an ambitious episode of Doctor Who with gorgeous animation, fantastic voice guest acting, and an intriguing mystery to solve. Perhaps its second act had too many ideas, but it was a great watch regardless. And I guess the real Lux was the friends we made along the way.
Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for listening to this. That's good. No, I'll give you that. It was good. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Who's There, a Doctor Who podcast. We will be back next week with what shall hopefully be a live episode with another special guest. Crispy, do you want to let the folks know who it's going to be?
It's Josh Nares.
Oh, there you go. No build up that time. There you go. So Josh Nez will be joining us for what should hopefully, fingers crossed, be a live review of The Well. I've heard some rumours about what this episode could be. I'm not going to mention them on this podcast because we don't tend to mention leaks or rumours or anything like that. But it sounds like it could be very interesting. So I'm I'm keen to see where we go with it. So we will see you all next week for that. Hopefully it'll be live on Sunday. The current aim is around midday UK time, but as always, that may adjust. So just keep an eye on the YouTube channel and we'll set up a live event when we know when it's going to happen. But until then, thank you all very much for watching. It is goodbye from Crispy.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Richard.
Goodbye, happy times and places.
And it's goodbye from me. See you all next week with our well review for Season 2, Episode 3 of Doctor Who. Allons-y, baby.
Allons-y, baby!